We're opening the Munising Marketplace Advisory Board meeting here. Who we got on right now?
Kathy, Jim, and Jim.
And who?
Jim Tischler.
Jim. Hey, Jim.
Good morning.
Where do we want to start here?
Sorry, agenda.
Yeah, we got one here.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel.
I can share it, Joel, if you don't have it right in front of you.
Got one now. Yeah, Jill, if you want to take over with that?
Oh, I just need permission.
Oh, it's fast. If you want to take that over, Jill.
Yeah, Joel needs to give me permission, it looks like.
Are you gonna admit people as they come in? Or what's the best way to do this? Yeah, but as people pop in, you have to admit them.
Oh, it doesn't automatically come in?
I'll just give her permission and ask her though.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks. Having a hard time hearing people in the room, so I'm going to turn up my volume a little bit. Probably just me getting old. All right, well, hello, everybody. It might be helpful for us to know who all is present. So I'm just going to take a moment before we dig into the technical details and see if we can do a round of just who's present.
Up here in Elder. County Commissioner Kelly Livermore. Pam Johnson, Elder County Treasurer, Elder County Land Bank Chair.
Dean Seaver, County Commissioner.
Joel Vanderbilt, Elder County Clerk.
Rhonda Stardens. Rick Nebel.
That's it from Elder County.
Okay, and on the phone, looks like Shannon and I are present, as well as Kathy. Is anybody with you?
No, it's just me.
Okay, and Jim Tischler?
Present.
Great. All right. Thank you all for making time for today. With that, we can dig right into some of the technical details. As you all know, we had been working to find financing for the restructuring of the Munising Marketplace building. Just to remind everybody of where we landed in size and scope. We are looking at a 3-story building with 32 residential apartments and 6,500 square feet of commercial space, which would only include the proposed childcare and the proposed fresh food store co-op. This is down considerably from the previous design, which had 39 units and over 11,000 square feet of commercial space. The overall cost of this building dropped from roughly 20 million down to 14,300,000, which was part of our goal, so that we could find financing with a smaller gap, so that we could fill it and move forward. We switched our large tax credit program for the project from new market tax credits, which are no longer available to this census tract, unfortunately, due to a change in federal legislation, to the low-income housing tax credit program with very minor changes to the rents in the residential units. And unfortunately, I don't have that exact detail in front of me, but we went from roughly over 500 to 1,200 in a range for rents to roughly 480 to 1,150. So very small change in the rents. as a result of the change to the low-income housing tax credit program. We started to reach out to lenders to get financing, to get term sheets for the financing, and we were successful. We received a term sheet from the National Equity Fund, which is a large equity investor for low-income housing tax credit projects, very interested in the project. And the correlating debt for that tax credit, we received a term sheet from IFF, which is a regional CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution in Chicago. Between those two pieces, those are the majority of the financing, or I guess the primary financing for the building that would drive all other components. Shannon, anytime you want to jump in, I know I jumped right into the detail. Please stop me. Please feel comfortable. Or if anybody has questions, because I'm trying not to use acronyms, but it is a sickness that we are definitely afflicted with. Our next stop in restacking this project was to circle back with the state of Michigan to understand the availability of financing. We're going to talk about that in a little bit further down, but in relation to the financing and the term sheets from the lenders, those have been secured. And Pam, I will make sure that you have a copy of those so that you can see what those terms are. They include the pricing on the tax credit. They include the interest rate and term on the debt and all the other necessary pieces to understand how the financing works in the deal. Our next, so this is our new financing strategy, is the low-income housing tax credit for the upper floors, the 2 floors above, and then conventional financing for the ground floor, grocery store and childcare. Our next step in the process, like I said, was to talk to the state about renewing the request for transformational brownfield. As you all remember, the original transformational brownfield plan includes the fire hall. And the reason that includes the fire hall is to meet minimum investment criteria for the city of Munising. Minimum investment is set in the statute based on population. And in order for Munising to receive a transformational brownfield plan without a waiver from the Michigan Strategic Fund, it has to have a minimum investment of, I believe, 15 million is the capital investment in the project that's necessary in order to move forward. So part of our challenge was we're right on that border. The new budget for the 3-story building is, like I said, 14.3, which is necessary to fill gaps, but it also put us under the cap for transformational brownfield. If we include the fire hall, which we had done previously, we would be over that gap. However, moving to item number 2, the fire hall the owners of the fire hall received some financing from the state that had specific limitations on the sale of the property after receiving those funds. Those funds were necessary. They helped fix a hole in the roof, they stabilized the property and protected it from harmful elements, but it did change our ability to purchase that building outright from Gateway Properties, which is owned by the Hall family. We worked on some creative solutions to figure out how to move forward without a straight out title transfer of the building. And we came up with a long-term ground lease that allowed us to finance the improvements in the fire hall and move forward with the project. We also talked about limiting the improvements in the fire hall to just the tap room and just white boxing some of the remaining spaces so that we could test the market for the activities in the fire hall and limit everybody's risk on the investment. It took a little while. We had planned on being at this point about 2 months ago in our overall process of seeking transformational, but negotiating this ground lease and getting everybody comfortable with the terms and negotiating back and forth with the halls and Gateway took a little bit longer, and that is respectable because it's a totally different structure. And we just received a signed letter of intent from Gateway Properties last week. I believe it was last week, and immediately went to the next step of requesting a status on transformational brownfield. So, and let's back up because I have just put out a lot of information and I want to make sure that everybody's with me. That the reason for doing that is to incorporate, first of all, Shannon and I are personally invested in the fire hall. We want to see that succeed. We have invested in pre-development, and incorporating them into the same transformational brownfield makes both projects pencil much better than they would without this program. We did a lot of creative analysis on potential operating revenues and expenses. We hired a consultant from downstate who has done a number of shipping container community spaces. There's one in Lansing and one in Detroit. And they have successfully operated these mixed use commercial and entertainment and retail venues. So we hired them to help us build out the business plan for the fire hall and use those numbers to incorporate into the ground lease with Gateway Properties so that we could get everybody comfortable with what that would look like. I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions so far.
Now, how long of a long-term lease was that?
So we only signed a 7-year ground lease with actually, we didn't sign a lease. Let me be correct. We signed a letter of intent, which is just a document that says that we both are interested in moving forward with signing a lease that would have to be signed before we entered into any other financing agreements. So, but the LOI was only for 7 years. And at the end of that term, we would either purchase the property at the market value at that time, or we would enter into a long-term triple net lease as an occupant. Any other questions?
Yeah, on you said 14.3, and you gotta make it to 15. Does that include the $500,000 that we got into it already?
Yes. So
Okay.
those are all expenses that are part of pre-development. They are deposits. Well, the deposits don't count, but the architecture, the engineering, the environmental, all those pieces are in that overall budget. The fire hall new budget is just over 2 million, which includes getting the building to white box and building out all of the pieces necessary to meet code and add the tap wall, which is something that we had all talked about, and it would launch the occupancy of the space, test the market for an entertainment venue like that, beverage and entertainment venue, and it limited the investment so that we could mitigate risk. And the overall investment for that, it was or is about 2.1 million, down from over 4 before. I will tell, oh, go ahead, please.
This is Rod. Would you remind everybody why the fire hall development is necessary for the Munising marketplace development?
Well, a couple of reasons, and I know Shannon probably has a lot to say about this. It's the #1 redevelopment priority for the city, as all of you probably remember from their master planning process. But the key reason is to get the investment, the joint investment for both projects over 15 million so that we could pursue the transformational brownfield benefit. And at 14.3 plus the 2 on the marketplace, plus the 2.1 on the fire hall, that gets us over the 15 million minimum investment for the transformational program. Were you thinking of anything, I'm sure there's other reasons that you're thinking. I'm a math person, so if you and Shannon have any other reasons to connect these that I'm not thinking about.
Curious, if the marketplace was a standalone 15 million, would you need the fire hall?
It would not. Um, well, that's not true. I don't know the answer to that. When I proposed that to um, MEDC a few months back, they were not as excited because transformational really has to do with jobs and economic activity, and they really like the nature of the fire hall. We did not get an absolute answer to that question, but it was definitely not as favorable as doing both projects.
I
Okay.
would add, as Jill said, it really boosts all the fundamentals at the MEDC. Number one, it's been a vacant, blighted resource. It's, historically, from the historic preservation, it's on one of the targeted statewide lists for redevelopment of opportunity. It is, fundamental in its location to the city of Munising, being in the heart of the downtown district, located on a main core. It would increase walkability, which would increase scoring to the city, that could bring in more economic resources to the communities. So all of those pieces without the fire hall, the marketplace does touch on the components. The fire hall further enhances all of those elements, and it would change the criteria considerably. Same thing as Jill said, just even it listed from the MEDC, from the redevelopment ready communities criteria, and the master plan is the number one goal of the city to have that reestablished and operating in the community.
I think the number one goal is housing. That
I wouldn't
Right.
disagree, but we're literally just reinstating what is currently in the existing master plan.
Well, and um, to go along with this, and kind of leading into our next topic, when we called the MEDC or sent an email to set up a brief call to understand where they were at with transformational brownfield, they told us that since last year, or a year and a half ago, when we started the transformational process, we were pretty early in. We were one of the first projects from a town of our size, or your size, and a project like ours in the pipeline. And unfortunately, in that time frame, a whole bunch of other projects have come into the pipeline at the state seeking transformational brownfield benefits for projects like Munising Marketplace. So not only is the project smaller, if we were right at that 15 million, I think that was Rick who asked this question, it may not be as competitive now that there is so much competition for this tool, after the changes in legislation that expanded the tax capture, which happened last year, and there was a lot of press on the program expanding. So right now, just Munising Marketplace would not meet the threshold. If we added 700,000 to the budget, it would be that much more gap, and it may not be competitive with all of these other projects in the pipeline. And Shannon, if you want to jump in, I'm kind of hogging the show here, and maybe relay a little bit about our call with MEDC yesterday.
Yes, based on all this information, we were ready to circle back. We scheduled a preliminary call with the MEDC. That call really was simply to get through some of the basic fundamentals on the next steps with transformational. At this time, we need transformational, as well as when we get down to number 4, which is gap financing. The MEDC, much like earlier in the year, is at commitment for their statutory funding. So part of this conversation is that we do need to circle back and have a conversation with the advisory committee and with the state land bank moving forward. Because transformational, without that would increase our gap. And just understanding when we talk about the availability and the competitiveness of, as Jill said, of the projects in the pipeline, their pipeline, their commitment to this to their fiscal year funding is still committed. And we need to have conversations at a higher political level, to see, you know, what the pathway is to get into the transformational pipeline. And what the next steps are. They did confirm that we would need to restart and be re-engaged in that process moving forward. So we would have to go through a new underwriting analysis right now as we move locally to get through the local public process. We would have to engage the MEDC once again to re-review the updated information, and provide their final underwriting analysis. And I'm leaving the rest of the next steps into 4 because it all comes together here.
So, just to, have a kind of a simple conversation on transformational. The reason that this program is so beneficial is that, you can only program as much debt on a project as you can pay on an annual debt service, right? Like we all have mortgages, like that's how it works, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately, what transformational does is it allows you to capture other taxes beyond your property taxes. You can capture the income taxes from the people who live in the building, which are state taxes. You can capture withholding taxes from the commercial users in the building. And now, because of the recent changes in legislation, you can capture sales and use tax in the retail areas of the building. So the impact to this development is about $117,000 a year in revenue that the building could use to pay down debt. So it's a big hit to the project when you don't have all that revenue to pay debt. It really limits your sources to grants and equity, which with no return. So it's a really wonderful program. And I think all these other small communities are starting to pick up and have gotten in line. And what we were told yesterday is because all of the allocations are filled, if we went forward, we would have to have a substitute for that funding source lined up in order for them to even proceed, which is extremely challenging because there really aren't that many funding sources that provide that type of annual revenue that can be used to support private debt. At this point, we've taken a look at, and let's stop there. Are there any questions about the program or the messaging from MEDC, which was pretty much a stop sign at this point? That we really are not in a position to move forward because they have so many other competing projects that fill up their entire bucket of funding between now and the end of the legislation. And I asked, because there is a statutory requirement that a percentage of this funding be dedicated to smaller communities like Munising, but what we heard in response was that the majority of the number of projects in the pipeline, not the volume of the request, but the number of applications, the majority is coming from smaller communities. So at this point, we are kind of going back to the drawing board and really understanding what our other options are for filling in the gaps. It creates a an additional $2 million gap by losing the transformational. At this point, we're kind of going back to the drawing board and understanding how this looks without these additional taxes and how much debt we'll be able to carry on the building without this program. And we'll need to, and I'm going to let Shannon talk about, activating all the partners in the advisory committee. But it is going to look slightly different. There's going to be a large ask that we're going to need to make of the state in order to help fill the gap in the building.
Well, and I'll jump in here because that leads us to actually 4 and 5 combined. Our next step, and this is where we really need to lean on calling the state land bank in and bringing the advisory committee members in. Our next step, and just how everyone works, this is a very political process. It always is a political process, and the political strength lead. When we've been talking about transformational brownfields, there are bills right now that are going through called the SOAR package, which would reinstate the new funding year for transformational brownfield, along with additional funding and the gap programs that are needed for both MISTA financing, which is 100 million in eligible grants through gap sources there with Housing Community Development Trust Fund, and reallocating some of this fiscal year spending into MEDC projects. At this state, it would be our goal to have the state land bank go in and start to advocate and have conversations about having the project be a line item, especially if there's a lot of conversation that this might be on the agenda to move through lame duck. MISTA just received financing about 2 months back, just so everyone knows when you hear all this political like garble. And 80% of the $50 million that was approved, communities and projects got line item allocations for specific projects. So this is not unusual to see. But at this time, we want to be ahead of, saying that we've got the project moving forward. We want to have conversations right now on those line item allocations. In order for that to happen, we need to all be on the same page, because we did have a conversation with InvestUP recently, and there is still some negative feedback going on in the community about the next steps of this project and about the viability of businesses and things moving forward. So we need to make sure that everyone is on the same page politically about the importance of housing and the importance to what this advisory committee believes are the strong points within this. And that communication needs to happen. And Jim, I'm actually going to bring you on because I know you have feedback. We've been discussing what these next steps. Do you have anything to add to some of those pieces and what the next steps would be as we have this discussion?
Most of you, if not all, know me, know my reactions here. In one word right now, I'm disappointed. I'll be direct. I'm disappointed in my fellow state agency. Now, what do we do about that? The lame duck session is going to be a very political session. There's no guarantees on anything right now because there's not an agenda that's been set. I don't have too much to share with you at this moment, right, about where to go with this, other than we want to have some conversations internally, and we're going to have those conversations internally. But while we're doing this, I think it's imperative to know that the local partners are committed to still committed to doing this project as it exists right now.
And I think, and I know everyone wants a number, right? What is the gap? Well, I mean, in true financing session, it depends. Just because the transformational brownfield is not available doesn't mean that traditional brownfield is not available. And of that 2,714,000 are ad valorem property taxes. And those are taxes that are still under the control of the city, the DDA, and the county. So, I think to Jim's point, in order for all of us to put a package together as a cohesive unit, we have to know which pieces the local units of government are supportive of moving forward, and what that would be the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes on the upper floors of Munising Marketplace, and a brownfield plan that captures the commercial taxes on the ground floor. And Kathy, I know your question is going to be, how does this look different from what we previously approved? Are there any changes? Before you guys can answer that question, but that is what we need to know is whether everyone will still be supportive of the local pieces of the brownfield plan that were previously approved. Because without knowing that, I can't tell you exactly what the gap is, because that brownfield piece, it plays a large role in driving how much debt the property can withstand, if that makes sense.
Hey, question, Shannon, you were talking about the feedback on the housing here. I don't know who you're talking to or who's been saying it, but if they're saying that housing is not an issue here, they shouldn't be in a position to be talking, because as far as I know, housing is an issue in Elder County, flat out. So if somebody is saying that,
I think
I'd
what
like
she
to
was
know.
meaning was the business parts, not the housing, but
Yes,
another
correct.
tree in town, another daycare in town. These different components and businesses, will they be able to have enough employees? Will we have?
well, we
get
gotta
enough
get housing
business?
to get the
So
4 piece.
I think that's what you
I
meant,
think it all
right?
comes-
The business part, not the housing.
Correct.
And I'm a business owner too, but you know, people are making decisions. I think people are making decisions sometimes not want competition, and I don't think that should be involved in here. You know, we should be open to any bit and all businesses. And that's a big part of this is these grants is they want multi-use buildings. So I don't know who's saying, you know, what, and they should say it to the whole, not to one person's ear.
That was the feedback you got from InvestUP. I know InvestUP very good, so I'm curious, was it the business?
The feedback for InvestUP is there was still, concern about the project, the next steps, communication. That's what we got. We didn't get a specific, and we just met with them. Oh gosh, Jill, was it like 2 weeks ago?
About 2 weeks ago.
And they have asked, they are included now on these advisory committee meetings. They have a lot going on, so they're going to join, or at least they want to just be apprised of what's happening in these sessions moving forward. So they can offer, any resources or support as needed. But that was the feedback we got. They didn't, state where it came from. So I think this rolls up into the next steps. The next steps for us is to circle back with Pam or Dean in the state land bank and have some internal conversations politically about exploring the gap opportunities that are available and having some conversation between the agencies about where lame duck is and strategies that we take moving forward. We have been communicating regularly with Jim in the state land bank as, these steps have happened. So, we can determine strategy. And being early in as the new funding sources are aligned. And I think that we need to circle back internally, have some ongoing conversations with MISHDA, see where those opportunities are, have some conversations with the land bank. We have gotten, obviously, the state land bank's commitment to continue these conversations with the state agencies and their commitment and our other state agencies, including the MEDC, to explore our options. And that we will circle back with the committee very soon to discuss the outcome of those meetings and conversations and the next steps. I mean, ultimately, looking at what could be proposed in lame duck and what can be proposed in new funding mechanisms that, as Jill said, would fill these pieces. And as you guys know, that's the chicken and the egg, because filling this gap, a lot of times there's conversations locally that we can't answer the DDA's questions, or we can't start the local processes with the cities. these gap sources really determine the criteria and the end budget of how we finish everything at the local level and how able to answer questions. And it's very difficult because we are ready to finalize terms, as Rick will tell you. We've been having ongoing conversations, but we needed to get our term sheets and ensure, that we were moving forward with that strategy to meet his terms in order for us to circle back and provide feedback to the DDA. Especially on taxing and the next steps of the brownfield, we have to have all of these pieces. Each one of these pieces are highly complex. And unfortunately, this is what it takes to get projects like this done. As you can see, why a lot of communities oftentimes, when they're looking at housing, think it shouldn't be this difficult. These are the pieces we need in order to get everyone's questions answered and to move through at the local level, to start engaging.
But I'm going to add something, and I think that it would be in all of our best interests if we had support letters from the DDA and the city. Kathy, and I don't think Devin's there or on the phone. We can talk to him separately, understanding that there is a formal process that has to take place for the approval of a pilot. And that all they could put in writing was that they're generally supportive of the project. But there is a very strong impression that we are not all on the same page. That is the impression at the state level.
Jill,
Yeah.
so before you go any further, we've done support letters before for the project. I mean, I've got a meeting with with the DDA. I mean, how different do you want this letter to be? I mean, when you say you need support letters, I mean, I've done support letters from the partnership, chamber, and DDA before for the project. So can those not be used, or are these like all new, different? Because I mean, if they need to say the DDA supports or whatever, or city supports PILT, I mean,
Honestly, I don't think
that's gonna have that's a different.
Yeah, it's not about what the lenders need. It's about going through a process to make sure we're all on the same page. And maybe what that support letter needs to say is that you guys have discussed the new structure of the building, that we've limited the commercial. Happy to put together a memo like we did previously, but trying to keep all the communication flowing through this committee down through you and Dale. I don't know. I'm just trying to avoid these appearances that we're not all on the same page. And I thought maybe if we could get an updated project description and memo and an update of the ask to the DDA through you without a formal request for approval right now, just this is where we're at. This is how things look. This is, if we're still going for the ad valorem, this is how it would change, and have you have a conversation with the DDA and us getting something back that they have reviewed the plan. They understand what's coming.
They're not going to want to give, and let me try to be frank. I can't think of many groups that would, but they're probably not going to want just me to tell them, me telling 9 people, hey, because I can't give details. Of course, you can give details to where they're going to say, okay, we're going to sign on. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, and
that's what I feel you're asking, and I'm like, God, I can see them saying, no, no, not until we really know all the details, and then once we know the details, then we can go ahead and say, yeah, we support the details. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and definitely not asking for any approvals or anything like that. Just a kind of validation that they have been informed of the proposed changes, the rents, and
but that's really pretty complicated stuff that you're talking about just right there. You would have to probably put something together that would take them some time to take a look at all that. They're going to want to ask questions. That's just not going to be something that I can have a turnaround really quick. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I definitely want to start all the activities that Shannon's talking about, but I definitely think that something has to start here so that we don't get hit, like we kind of got hit with a roadblock with Invest UP. And want to make sure that we're starting a path toward formal presentation. And I do think, Shannon, that that's really just going to be a regular brownfield plan without the transformational. And we're making a decision to, we got to make a decision pretty quickly, whether we're going to go that route or push the transformational, I don't know. But just, I'm trying to avoid situations like Invest
Well,
UP happening again.
And just in response to Jill, the first comment, the first thing MEDC asked, even with the advisory board, was, what does the DDA say? So like there's a roadblock block there and that financing. But yes, Kathy, we can circle back. Jill, I think you're speculating because right now we still need to have conversations with the state land bank on transformational brownfield. Kathy, if we were to move forward, there would be no expectations for anything to be signed without us either personally coming and meeting and going through all of these updates, to your point, with the DDA, and making sure that these terms were high level, knowing that we would have to get through approval on things, that are going to be important. Until we have that data, we wouldn't have that level of expectation. So I think we will circle back and coordinate with you. And obviously those expectations on anything that we would be needed would be something fundamentally like you support housing, you support the city's master plan, you support and, respect
Something
that there's,
general. Well,
yeah,
and that's really what
generalized.
was done before. It's
Yes.
just really a repeat with a new date on it.
Maybe
I
a
hate to
little
say it
bit,
like that.
maybe a little bit more detailed
Yeah.
on what you will support. How about we move this, what you will support from the business perspective? But nothing, that would take away, obviously, the public process at the DDA would have to complete. So we can circle back with you and have that conversation, and obviously know
Yeah,
that
because
process
I
would have to
can't.
go through a meeting.
Yeah, because I can't and I won't like say what 9 other people, how they're gonna vote and how they're gonna think, what questions they're gonna ask, that type of thing, because they all, are gonna have different concerns and that type of thing. But I mean, we've been through all the transformational before. DDA has spent years, doing different stuff with it, spent money. We spent money on consultants to learn how to do transformational, so that's what's a little bit different
Absolutely.
about us than other entities. We have spent money and a considerable amount of time, the board has. So, but I don't want to speak for them. I that wouldn't make me comfortable to say, I mean, this is something they have to, vote on or whatever happens to be, but it's something in general. Yeah. I mean,
Understood.
yeah, but specifics to a project, I can't say. Yeah.
So just go ahead.
I'm a little confused on, you said you had a roadblock at Invest UP. Did you go to Invest UP after the gap funding problem? Because I know Invest UP is more
No,
equity, is that?
we have a project in Marquette Township that has received preliminary PUD approval. And we have an equity letter there. We have an application in for my neighborhood. And it took us 9 months to get Nicolay Bank comfortable with the for sale structure, but we got term sheets for all of our financing. But they want to use one of the programs that Invest UP had. They have a cash collateral program that they're offering for housing projects. You guys probably have heard about that. Yeah. And Nicolay wants to use, well, Rick, I know you have. Nicolay wants to use that program for our Marquette Township project, but when we called Invest UP, they immediately brought up that they had heard some things about Munising Marketplace and needed to talk to us about those things before they would even talk about Marquette.
Okay.
Well, when are they gonna talk to you about those things?
We had that conversation 2 weeks ago with them. I'm sorry, did you ask when we talked to them?
Yeah, I mean, they said they had some things about Munising. What did they have to say about Munising?
that what Shannon said, that they had heard some things locally that basically gives them the impression, we did not get details, we did not get names. They basically implied that they heard that locally that the organizations were not on the same page about the project. That they were
For the Marquette.
no, for Munising Marketplace.
No, but that should have nothing to do with a prima facie, what you want to do in Marquette. Should have zero what to do.
I couldn't agree with you more, but it does. Everything is connected, and you know, they wanted to really understand what was going on. They were, and Shannon, please correct me, but it was my impression that they were unaware of the advisory council structure. They didn't seem to know that this committee even exists. So we went.
What
right?
should it matter? What should it matter? We're trying to get this to that, and we created a committee to get to the point to bring something to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've crossed that hurdle, but it definitely points to a larger issue of this appearance that we're not all on the same page about the structure and focus of the building and the populations that we're serving, the rents. And I think we need to start really figuring out how to make sure that we're all on the same page and moving forward.
Yeah. Shannon, is this coming from Marty or is this coming from Amy Berglund?
It was Steve Arwood, Marty, and Amy all on the call, and they didn't state. I'm under the assumption it was a conversation that Amy had with someone, but they, you know, they did not give us particulars and who it was.
Think you can find that out?
Can we invite Amy to one of our meetings? Can we get her down?
They have been invited. Just so you know, we did circle back. Marty and Amy were included in this invite. They're aware of the board and why they're important. I think Dean had the question is, you know, they're the UP's economic development agency. And, you know, Marty is part of several different boards and has broader insight to where investments happen. So, and you know, obviously they're pushing housing within this region. So they are just an important supporter. As they stated, they will continue to be a supporter.
Looking
And
for this equity investment or cash collateral?
It was cash collateral coming from them for the loan that Nicolay has given us a term sheet for.
For Munising.
No, they don't have an involvement in Munising.
Can I say something that probably, so I think I might have mentioned it, a couple of you might know, but I'm technically an employee of Upward Talent, which is Michigan Works, and have been for 13 years. So I happened to be at a meeting with the CEO of Upward Talent, which is Michigan Works, who is going to be in the downstairs of the marketplace. The subject came up about the marketplace. This was about a month or two ago. And, you know, kind of where was that at? And I told him, I said, yeah, we're having meetings and that type of thing. And that I understood that they were no longer part of it anymore, you know, that space, because now you're talking a co-op downstairs, right? And a daycare, correct? Correct, Jill? Deb Brunel said to me, oh, really? This is the first I've ever heard of that. I didn't know because she hadn't heard from anybody that they were even out. They were quite surprised, which I was quite surprised by that comment. I will just say that, but not that they're wanting to be in now or anything, but it was just, I think they were surprised that they were never notified of that by anybody.
So I did notify Amy Flory.
Somebody's missing something there because I'm on the board of Michigan Works and I've talked to Deb and I told her, because she called me about it a long time ago, Michigan Works can't afford to go into that building. And
yeah, I know, but they didn't have any official notice from my understanding. Deb didn't from anybody.
Well, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
I spoke with her.
Yeah.
And we can't afford, Michigan Works can't afford to be in there. So it would have been the other way around. Michigan Works should have sent something to Munising Marketplace saying that they gotta be out because they can't afford to be in there. It's not the other way around. So somebody's got miscommunications there also.
I'm
I
just
did-
saying, this is what happened. This is what happened in the meeting. And I
Kathy,
was surprised.
just for confirmation, I think Jill's trying to say, and maybe it's some miscommunication internally, because there has been conversations, probably not as much as they should take place with Amy Fleury.
Amy Fleury works in accounting. Amy Fleury is not the CEO. Amy Fleury is just, like I said, she works in accounting. The CEO of UP Michigan Works is Deb Brunel and has been that way. And before her was Bill Raymond, and before her was Orrin Bailey for the last 13 years.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
honestly, I think, carrying them along in the process a little bit better is 100% appropriate. Kathy, we
Yeah.
would not want to give them any definitive decisions until we know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
And Amy is the person who I've negotiated the LOI with and things like that.
Maybe is a person that you've got, yeah, but she's not any, and I've mentioned this to you guys before, who to speak to over there. Because
Yeah,
I know
and
we've had this conversation before, but
yeah,
I mean, is if you want to talk to a decision maker.
I think the whole situation with Michigan Works was it would have been incredible to provide a space for them. But it was very challenging to give Deb enough support to sign the LOI that she signed. She was very reluctant to sign that LOI. And I knew that we would have to find additional funding sources to subsidize that lease. Because as you know, we had an LOI, but the state was told that we didn't. And we had to produce it, show them the LOI, and then get a new one signed, even though we were still in the time frame of the LOI, because there was information being provided to MEDC that Michigan Works was not in support of the project, even though we had a signed LOI. So I did talk to Deb at length, and it just seemed very challenging for her to make commitments. So we have not officially cut them loose yet, had not officially carved them out of the project until I sent the email to Amy just recently. And I am happy to reach back out to Deb and apologize for not communicating exactly where we were in the process, but didn't want to communicate anything until we had a better picture of the path we were leading in.
Yeah, well, from my understanding, they didn't seem to really know what was going on for quite some time. So I'm just saying that. It's just my understanding. So
Yeah.
maybe that's part of what's coming down the pike.
I had that conversation with her a year ago.
Real quick, I just want to make sure that Invest UP isn't holding up anything here in Munising, other than
No.
your job.
No.
They are not.
No,
Okay.
no. In fact, they submitted a support letter for our Marquette project. So we have moved past the issue with Invest UP.
Okay, we'll keep hearing it. How about the purchase agreement? How patient does Munising Lands have to be?
I'm going to let Shannon cover that because she's working on that with our ownership team.
Before Shannon starts, if I can just interject, I apologize. I need to step out for another meeting. So my request would be that the local parties, led by all of you, let's organize a meeting with Joseph Rivet to strategize sooner than later. But let me know what you can do, what you guys want to do. Okay?
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Have a great
Jim.
day. Yep.
Rick, I think we're ready. We do have, obviously, we wanted to get those term sheets in the LOI. Those were our two biggest pieces right now to be able to ensure, as we told you. And we'll circle back with you after. We want to have just this meeting with the state land bank, but we will circle back with you after this meeting and get something set up.
Okay. It is, because we're out of contract for a long time and we want it to happen, but it has to be fair to all parties. And so, Pam, I know you and I have talked about that briefly or several times briefly, but we just want it to move forward, but we're just kind of in limbo from our perspective. And I have other people that I have to respond to, and I just so we'll
Understood.
We'll look forward to the follow-up.
Okay.
Sorry,
So Faith,
that sucks. That's a tough.
I think one of the next pieces, Shannon, that I will be working on is just a write-up of kind of where we're at with everything, to figure out what's helpful for Jim and Joe, instead of just sending the pro formas.
What do we,
so
what do we gotta do as a county to move this? Or
I,
any of the supporters? I mean, where do we sit?
Dean, the next steps is really, as Jim said, schedule a separate meeting. If you want to be there, but Pam and the land bank, so we can start to have these discussions about getting these gap pieces moving forward. Getting a better handle on that and knowing what the strategy is will allow us to come and finish all these localized process and move forward. So it's critical, I think, that we follow up and get something on the schedule immediately after this meeting. That's the next action item. And we can determine what we need from the county. The next action item is for Joe Rivette to go, directly to the agencies and start to negotiate these pieces. From there, just our takeaways are to follow up with Rick and get everything scheduled. And as a result of those meetings, Dean, we will know what we need locally if we need to follow up with Kathy and what those pieces are. But that meeting is the next next step. And I think that meeting will produce action items for members of the advisory committee.
Yeah. I mean, we can, if we need, you were talking about promoting this and getting this out there. We can get it in the newspaper, call it TV. I mean, get this out there that we're trying to get this working for Alger County.
Yeah, and that's the next step. Let's meet with the land bank. I think that will produce our internal action items of all of those pieces. I'd like to have those meetings with the agencies, at the table with that, to determine how we're going to fill this gap. And then once we get through that, as I said, we'll determine all of those pieces of what we need to do at the local level.
Yeah. Anything else? Anybody?
Any other questions?
I think we're good.
I will say, Shannon and I have been working for 30 years. This is the most difficult deal to finance I've ever worked on. And if you are hearing things on the ground or, if there's any information that you think would help us do this better, or just let us know, pick up the phone or send us an email and let us know. I don't think we've ever worked harder to stack a deal than this deal. It is really challenging. But we are committed and willing to do all the brain damage it takes to get this done and lobby and advocate at the state. But really want to make sure that we're all, and I fully take accountability for, not reaching out to Deb sooner and letting her know what was going on. But same, if you guys hear anything, whatever, let us know. Talk to us.
I'm sorry about that too, Deb, because like I said, I talked to her a year ago. She called me and asked me what she should do. Because we can't afford it. I said, well, if we can't afford it, we can't be in there. Flat
Right.
out. She goes, I agree. So she should have come back to you guys and said, hey, we gotta be out, we can't afford that much rent. That is nothing on you, that's on Deb. Deb should have apologized, it should be the other way around, in my eyes.
Well, and I think I felt that in my conversation with her, Dean. She was still willing to sign the LOI and move forward, but she
I
needed,
thought she said multiple times that the rent was high.
Yeah.
I heard that from Deb say many times, so that does not, I mean, Dean, I think that's probably incorrect to assume that she was whatever, because she thought that the rent was too high, and from my understanding, I don't think there had been a lot of communication going back and forth, because she would always ask me, hey, have I heard anything? What's going on?
but Kathy, we won a competitive RFP
I
with
know,
that
I know,
rent
I know,
proposal.
I know. I'm just saying, and that's probably after a conversation too. That never mind. But I mean,
And we based our rent off of rent that they were paying on a new
Yes.
building in Escanaba.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. It was all based on numbers they gave us.
Yeah.
I think their situation changed. I mean, let's be real. They had a change in budget. Deb was feeling very pressured. We wanted to move forward with them because they're such a great partner. We were willing to find additional resources to subsidize them. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. And we probably should have been talking a little earlier, but I really do think this would have been hard for them to make happen.
Yeah, it would have been a great place and everything, but
Yeah.
this is where you cannot, or you can't afford that. It's
Right.
plain and simple. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the full truth of it.
And
Yeah,
with the
and
co-op
I
coming in,
and I
right?
think they were also waiting to hear, from my understanding, they were also waiting to hear that, because I think you guys had talked about, from my understanding, about other people also sharing that space with Michigan Works. Maybe it was Veterans
Yeah.
Affairs, maybe it was
Yep.
this, maybe it was that, but I don't think Michigan Deb had maybe heard back on that one either, about as far as anybody else sharing space down there.
Well,
so that
we had put
would
in
have
the
made the rent
LOI.
stay high. Yeah.
That's what made her comfortable signing the LOI was that we committed to finding co-locators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But we wouldn't move forward on that until we got closer to, that's something that wouldn't happen until later. But we actually did have some entities lined up for that. But I mean, overall, we're going to need to subsidize the co-op. The co-op's going to need a lot of time and energy and resources to be successful. So it is in the best interest of the project, I think, to limit the number of users that require the amount of time and energy and resources that Michigan Works would have, even though it's a loss for the community.
I mean, we've got 6,500 square feet down there.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're trying to put this or this or this in there. I don't see why, that should be open to anybody with a business, except for, I'd say, the person that's selling it can put limitations on what they don't want, but that's the only person that can put limitation on what goes in there.
Yeah, we don't have financing this time that is driven by the use, and that's what happened last time. The new market tax credits were really driven by the commercial users in the building, and we don't have that this time. We are responding to your wishes and needs and what's going to be supported in the area. So, yeah, not limited by the financing this time.
We need housing, and I can say for experience in the summertime, more place to eat wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, you have a hard time. Try to take a lunch hour. You ain't gonna go and find somewhere to get something in a half hour. You're in line.
Now they're all closed.
Now they're all closed, yes. But as I said, in the summertime.
Yeah.
So, but if somebody wants to pay for it for the year round, I don't believe we should open it up to any business that goes in there. If they're gonna come and pay the money to go in, all for it.
Okay, well, next steps, Pam, we're gonna follow up after this to get a meeting scheduled with the state land bank. So we can start these conversations with the agencies on the remaining of the gap. Rick will follow up with you. And we will get an advisory committee set for next month. We can be available if we need to come in prior to that, and meet with anyone depending on what our priorities are that come out of this meeting with the agencies in the state land bank.
Other meetings and housing, why do we have to support this?
Thank you.
So it gets-
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Put finance and Scott together. Yeah.